Thank you. So I'm John Munslow, and with Tim Rowland-Deverell, the Department of Transport, I'm going to talk to you about climate change adaptation. Oh, you want a slide? There we go. The threat in our sector and how working together we have the opportunity to change our future. So there's some statements there. Those in my mind, they're the biggest threats to climate adaptation that we've got. I don't know whether you agree, yes or no. Seeing some nodding heads. So if we were ready, if we did know what we were doing, then, and I suppose this is questions to local highway authorities out there, who has a complete baseline of their carbon inherent in all their assets, the maintenance and management of those assets and the provision of all their highway services. And for any of us that support local highway authorities and as service delivery partners, do you understand the carbon in what you're doing? Do you understand the carbon in the services that you're supporting or the assets you're managing and maintaining for your client? Again, for local highway authorities, do we all have a plan for net zero for our highways assets and services by 2050? And do we have a plan for 50% within the next 5 years? Because that's the challenge most of us are up against. And have we all of us got highways adaptation plans in place? I'd say no, we haven't. I think we're thinking about it and we're trying to do it. And do we all know the locations on our road networks that are impacted by weather events? And do we have strategies to build in resilience to the weather impacts? If we do, why are the same places getting flooded every time? Why is it a surprise when a road gets flooded like the A421? And I don't want to be picking on local authorities, but that would have been a great example of floodwater attenuation if it had been part of a plan, but unfortunately it wasn't. And I say as a whole sector, we're not coordinated, we're not collaborative. There's a great work going on, but I think we're still doing it in silos. And that good work isn't connected, so we're not getting the best value we can out of that work across the sector. And we need to be better at that coordination and doing climate change as a whole together. So I think we need to work better together between us all, making more of the effort we're all putting in and getting more out for all of us. But what are we adapting for? And I said for, not to. I think adapting to, that implies it's happened and we're getting over it. We're not. We're adapting for. We're adapting for what's coming and for what's now. And I think that adaptation is for our future. And if we keep it in mind that we are adapting for, that will keep the momentum. I think that will help keep us moving and help us keep getting the support we're going to need. And thinking about what the climate, yes, we need to adapt to weather. But what weather? We've got rain and surface water flooding is a key one, but it's not the big weather events or just the big weather events that might only happen up north, down south or overseas. It's the day-to-day. And all those events are happening now. So as local highways authorities and all of us that are supporting the delivery of the maintenance and management of those assets across our sector, it's that big flood, that big network level resilience failure is just a day away. It is a card away. You could all pick a card and we could deal cards out. The card will come up. We all know that. We just don't know exactly when. I'm thinking of that, your resilience response to impacts of weather now are the first adaptation priority. We have great expertise and experience that gives us robust planning for frost and ice impacts across the network. When we get cold weather, we're strong when we put in place snow plans and we recover networks within hours, keep society moving. We get doctors to very remote people out in the middle of nowhere. We keep routes to school open and we keep amenities clear. So why are we not doing that for rainstorms as a whole? We just need to adapt that thinking. And we need to be adapting by building the resilience we need now for the weather and the impacts we're getting now, because that will free up our time and our headspace and our resources so we can think about adapting to what's next and what's next and what's next. And we need to adapt to how we maintain our highways in very different ways. So thinking of highway verges. In England, the highway verges roughly add up to 380 million square metres, which I'm told is about the size of the Isle of Wight. So that's a big area. And that's a nature reserve. That's a nature reserve that when the sun comes out, we don't trample over all of it all the time. And it's perfect for nature because nature can recover without us constantly interfering there. And because of that, highways are part of nature recovery. Highways are part of future food security. We also have the opportunity to support the improvement of air quality through appropriate planting of trees. And SUDS is another example where what we do to manage a physical highways issue has a knock-on effect for the rest of the community. And we need to adapt our approach to asset management as a whole. We're over-focused on carriageways and footways. Highway drainage, I think, is the next most important asset, and I feel we've put that on the too difficult pile. Perhaps in some case the doesn't matter pile, the I can't afford it pile. And then we seem to wonder why roads break up and we have potholes every spring. And there's certainly things out there to help us. Carbon Tech has Gully Smart to help manage drainage assets. We saw examples in Glenn's slides of what can help us manage drainage assets. So what I'm saying is the systems and the processes and the products are out there, but we're not using it at scale across the sector to make that big difference that we need to do to actually build in a marked difference in our adaptation and our resilience. And I know why we're restrained as a sector. We're restricted by limited and ever-reducing funding. So part of our adaptation needs to be make the case for the funding to put in place the physical measures, change the services so that we adapt as we move along. And as a sector, we've put a massive amount of time, energy and knowledge into valuation of our highways assets. So we know the big replacement number. But I don't think we're making use of that to show the value of investment in the highways to help us adapt from a community perspective, from a societal perspective. And we're also adapting to more than just the weather. We'll be using our highways infrastructure differently. So our maintenance hierarchies need to evolve to properly and fully incorporate functional adaptation across all assets, all travel routes, and for all users in all weathers. We need to adapt for active travel. More walking and cycling means we must change our winter maintenance programs and regimes to support safe active travel for all, not just car drivers. Our winter maintenance needs to become more inclusive of the people we exist for. And footways, every journey, or pretty much every journey, will use a footway at some point. And are we managing and maintaining them appropriately for use now? And are we managing it with a thought to an ageing population that is here and increasing? So we're adapting for more than the headlines, more than perhaps we truly collectively get across the sector. So to reinforce my point, it's not just whether we're adapting to, it's a fundamental and significant shift in how we approach the maintenance and management of highways infrastructure. Modal shift has and is happening in our cities. As asset owners, we have not caught up with that change yet. How we live and work has shifted significantly since COVID, and it will continue to change as society adapts. So we need to, as a sector, to adapt our thinking fast and keep that momentum, keep adapting for the future. And it's not easy to start. It's not easy to get that momentum. If you're a local highways authority, getting the understanding and support in terms of funding, even getting some messages listened to at senior management level can be really demotivating and demoralising. And we need to put a huge level of thought and effort into understanding the scale of adaptation, the scale of the immediate and the scale of the future and the scale of what we need to support us to achieve that change. So that, I'm afraid, is maybe a little bit less than positive, but if I can bring Tim up, he'll give you a much more positive outlook.
Thanks, John. So clearly we are facing an absolutely gigantic challenge with all this stuff, and it's something we really have to start thinking about now. From a government perspective, you've heard from Matt and Darren and Laura and Katie over the last day that we're still sort of waiting to hear really from our ministers about where they are on this stuff exactly. But it's abundantly clear from all the manifesto things we've heard already, that adapting to climate change is an absolutely key part of the missions that government has, and particularly, although slightly confusingly, underneath the clean energy superpower mission that has been labelled. But when you get into the supporting documents underneath all of that, there's something a bit more fundamental about the approach of this government that I think it's really worth bearing in mind. Mission government is all about doing things differently. So they describe a resolute focus on doing things that will make a real world impact and approaching problems with a long-term preventative approach. And that's exactly the kind of thinking we not just need in climate adaptation, but across the highway sector more generally. But change is not about central government in itself. We're going to get nowhere on this agenda without the whole sector getting on board. The signs are starting to be encouraging from my perspective. The DFT-supported hazard survey showed that authorities do really want to adapt their networks. It's more the how do we do this? How do we have the resources to do this question that is holding them back? And to be honest, over the course of this conference, other than money, which is obviously the number one question people have for me, the next thing on the list people want to talk about is climate adaptation and the challenges that it presents. And we're seeing sector organisations take this increasingly seriously, whether it's the CIHT that are about to publish their report on the matter, I think next week, local partnerships who are publishing updated guidance for local authorities on adaptation and resilience. Adept are working with the Environment Agency on local authority rapid adaptation pathways assessment. And then that's not to mention the deeming report, which was excellent a few years back, and the NHT's work on the carbon tool, and even Live Labs has an element. From the DFT side, you might remember we published a consultation on a draft transport adaptation strategy back in April. We're still running over that with the new ministers, so watch this space on that. But obviously, we're hoping that will move forward fairly soon. And then I was speaking earlier to some people, and we found out the Met Office about to launch their local authority climate service as well. So that's really worth looking out for over the next week or so too. But with all this activity, there's a huge risk of confusion, and us all going off in different directions and repeating work. So I'm absolutely delighted that the UKRLG are pushing forward with this too, and they're determined to provide leadership to support the sector, coordinate and collaborate as we move forward together. And that's going to become increasingly important. And it's not just about England, but it's all about the UK and beyond. There's a lot of lessons we can learn from across the globe. So I'm delighted that not only has the UKRLG set up the ABC board under the guidance of John Lamb, but that they've also created a dedicated adaptation sub-board to bring together people that really understand what needs to happen to meet this challenge and to provide sector leadership. And with that, I'm delighted to pass back to the new chair of that adaptation sub-board, John, who's going to talk to you more about his plans.
Thank you, Tim. So our new UKRLG adaptation sub-board. So the sub-board's part of that wider new board of UKRLG, adaptation, biodiversity and climate resilience. The reason for the sub-boards, it's a huge subject. Each of those is a huge subject and a huge challenge in itself. So by splitting it up, we can give it the focus that we need. And the adaptation board is focused on the physical adaptation of the highways infrastructure to meet the immediate and future challenges. So preparing those assets for the future environment they need to exist in and the future way we need to use them. But we also need to understand how to deliver the management and maintenance activities to ensure our workforces are protected and operations do not create avoidable carbon emissions, either directly or indirectly, and protecting ourselves as well as the infrastructure as we move through adaptation. So I'm chair of this new board. I need a new board now. I need some people on it. I need the expertise that's out here in the room today. So I'm looking for cross-sector representatives with the interest, the time and the passion to drive our adaptation as a sector. And my priorities are to bring together, collate and coordinate the work that's going on and then push it out there so we make most of the effort everyone's putting in. And I want to understand what will help the various parts of our sector best first so we can focus on that. Maybe take the quick wins, take the first priorities and then think about what we need to do after that. And I think overall the board is there to provide intelligence and guidance. When I say guidance, I don't mean just more documents that tell us how bad the problem is. I'd really want to see some clear to-do lists and how to do them to help support us all just make those steps forwards. And if you want to get involved, please let me know. The plan is to hold some sort of workshop in December to brainstorm this out, to really get all the input in so we can understand and try and see the threads that we need to look at and focus on and get us on the road of adaptation together by setting out our first actions and our first outputs that will support the sector-wide. So please come and have a chat with me or Tim after the presentation. My email's on there. I'd really like to know your thoughts, and if you want to get involved, it'd be great to speak to you. Thank you.